Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second session of the Community Foundation's new webinar series, The Intersection, where equity and vitality meet. I'm Annette Jimenez-Gleason, Program Officer for Vitality for Rochester Area Community Foundation. Before we begin, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. We will be recording today's session and plan to live stream on Facebook, on the Rochester Area Community Foundation's Facebook page. Also, we will be posting bios of our panelists in our chat, so please post questions using the Q&A tool. The photography of our panelists will be presented in an exhibit this weekend at the Black House Gallery in Rochester, and I will also include the registration info for that event. And without further ado, let me introduce Simeon Bannister, the Community Foundation's Vice President for Community Programs, who will tell you more about our series. Simeon?
Thank you, Annette. We're so grateful to have our guest today. We're so thankful for the audience that has joined us and is watching this afternoon. Welcome to the second in Rochester Area Community Foundation's 2021 webinar series, The Intersection, where equity and vitality meet. In this series, we feature speakers and panel discussions on issues that are related to our two grant-making goals, equity and vitality. At the Community Foundation, our mission is to empower donors and community partners to strengthen our region through philanthropy. Those grant-making goals, equity and vitality, are our inference that here in Rochester and around our region, the opportunities and challenges that we need to overcome are in those areas, equity and vitality. More specifically, in equity, we think about issues with respect to education and closing the achievement and opportunity gaps, reducing and deconcentrating poverty and promoting racial and ethnic understanding, and even more importantly, racial equity. In our vitality goals, we're working to promote arts and culture, to save our region's historic assets, both physical and the stories and narratives that we tell. We're focused on aging, and as a new entry to our action areas, we're thinking a lot these days about environment, sustainability, and climate justice. Over the years, as we've gone through this process of working through these grant-making goals, we've learned that these are not mutually exclusive, that in fact, they not only intersect, but they support and sustain one another. Today, you'll hear, for example, how some of the most interesting things that are happening in Rochester around racial equity are connected to our goals in arts and culture. In fact, today's discussion focuses on the work of a team of local photographers and videographers to document the protests, the demonstrations, the rallies, the movement that has grown in Rochester and around the country. Their work demonstrates the connection between art and culture and racial justice and advocacy. We're so excited to have them with us. Sit back, enjoy, and we hope that you join us for this series episode and for more in the future.
Thanks, Simeon, for that introduction. Good afternoon. My name is Maya Crane, and I am the Program Officer for Equity at the Rochester Area Community Foundation, and I'll be kicking this off with Rashaad Parker, who was overseeing this project that we are looking forward to hearing more about. So Rashaad, we're going to go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint so you can talk about some of the pictures that you took. But as that's happening, if you can just let us know a little bit about your background, Rashaad, and what it is about this what it is that you do, as well as the importance of this this project that you were part of.
Thank you, Maya. My name is Rashaad Parker, and I am an artist and activist and have been for quite some time. My background is in communications and fine arts. I am achieving my master's degree in fine arts and public administration at Visual Studies Workshop as we speak. Part of this is a part of my thesis work. I am the Community Outreach Coordinator for Flower City Arts Center, so I have direct access to young people and hopefully am making an impact on how they also see the opportunity to bridge art and social justice, as a matter of fact. And so this particular project that we embarked upon with the Community Foundation, which we're so grateful for their generosity towards us to be able to really document the Black Lives Matter movement in Rochester in particular, because in my experience, I've seen this community come together like never before. And it's incredible to see that solidarity, to see people stand up for justice and speak truth to power. And so it's very, very important work, and I'm so glad to have had, this experience with the photographers and videographers that's on this panel today. Those pictures went by really fast, but if I can...
We're going to bring them back up. So if you want to just tell about a little bit more about how you got the importance of this, why was this important to you, some of the emotions and stuff that came up as you were doing this project, and we're going to pull those right back up.
Okay. Well, the work is very, very important. It's very important to document history, as it were, because this is a very historic moment in time, in our culture, in our lives, in the city of Rochester in particular. So this work is very, very important. And it's very, very important that it be told by Black voices, as a matter of fact, because Black lives do matter, and Black lives are the ones that are being exterminated. And so we need to have voice, we need to be able to document this, and we need to be able to tell our stories in our own words. It's very, very important.
Thank you, Rashaad. While we're waiting for the pictures to come back up so you can talk about it, I'm going to ask Coca Ray David to talk a little bit about her work on this project, what it meant to her, and a little bit about her background as well as an artist.
Thank you, Maya. Hi, my name is Coca Ray. I'm a visual arts photographer. I am currently one of the photography heirs at Flowers of the Art Center. I've been doing work within the community, whether visually, artistically, fine arts, or just, portraiture, editorials, anything with publications. So with this project, just documenting all of this reminded me so much of my days in Charleston, South Carolina. I went to art school down there, and pretty much the first 6 months of my experience being down there was when Charleston 9 happened, So a lot of everything was kind of erupting left and right in different cities all over the country. So being in kind of like one of the epicenters that kind of like blew up, and that just blew up, I was in the midst of capturing and taking pictures. So a lot of this happening again years later in Rochester was like the same reaction, was capturing everything that was happening. So for me, a lot of it was doing portraits and showing different things that were happening throughout Rochester. So a little bit of some protests and rallies, but some other aspects of enriching the Black community, whether through events, gatherings, music, songs, storytelling. So for me, capturing all these pictures all over Rochester of events happening with Black people just doing protests in their own way, and me taking the pictures of it is another form of protest as well, because with this you're capturing what's happening. So with this project, and also the community aspect of just being in Flowers Art Center and already working alongside with Rashaad, it was like kind of like genuine. So with this project, we already were working on doing different things. Like for me, curating the gallery at the Ave Black Box Theater on Joseph was an honor to be able to do, and especially in honor of Daniel and what's happened. How else can you show what's happening in result of life and death and the shift of change other than showing pictures of those exact things happening? So, with everything that's happened, you already get connected with all these different photographers and videographers in Rochester, because everybody's capturing the same thing, just in different perspectives. So with this project and, curating it, this has been an honor to really see the different perspectives of those photographers and videographers. So yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about how the project affected you personally, taking these photos and attending all the many, rallies and protests that you did?
Yeah, it was a lot for me, to be honest. I couldn't, because for me, I had a mixture of it. So I was in the midst of the protest, but I was also seeing it virtually as well. And a lot of it was very, it was mixed emotions, because on there's like to see them on live, it makes it a little more traumatic because you're catching it from a different person's perspective and seeing what's happening. For me being there, I saw a different side as well. I saw what I saw in Charleston was like peaceful. Like I saw the peacefulness of it too, like being there to vocally talk about this stuff, having a community around gathering to experience the same thing and take in everything. It's interesting to see the different sides of that. So for me, it was a lot. I felt kind of helpless at times, because I felt like, what else can I do to really do something? Like, what else can I do? I felt helpless, to be honest, for me. So a lot of it was, I was taken aback from a lot, and reminded me of Charleston, and even how I felt even then. Like, I felt kind of helpless even then too. So a lot of this it made me realize, how else can I change things? And right now, for me to help co-curate this and also photograph this, I'm helping in the way of history. I'm showing what's happening. So.
Can you tell us a bit more about your own background? You said.
Oh yeah. So I have an associate's degree in liberal arts from MCC. I have a BFA in digital photography from the Art Institute of Charleston. I'm currently looking at going for my master's at BSW. So I shoot portraiture, fashion photography, editorials, conceptualized fine arts. That's a lot of my background. So anything with a person, any subject with a person, that's what I usually shoot.
And how did you get started in photography? Like, what drew you to that?
Photography was just an easier medium for me to express my emotions and my feelings. I've always been an artist. I've always said that since I was a little girl. I'm an artist. Photography just helps communicate thoughts, emotions, feelings. So for me, it was just easier to capture all that, whether through me, myself, as the subject matter, or other people in front of it. So I'm a Rochester native, so I pretty much, you could say I was born with a camera in my hand. Just being able to capture things around me and documenting it is so important,
And can you tell us a little bit more about the couple photos that we see on the screen?
Yeah. So the first one is a portrait of a young man I saw at one of the protests on so sorry. I cannot think right now. So I was yeah, I was huh?
September 8th, Jefferson Avenue.
Yeah. See, I was kind of going around taking pictures of people, and I saw this young man, and I loved everything he was wearing, like the button and his shirt and his mask was really a bold statement. And for me, I'm very big on using your body as a vessel of information, and that is a lot of what he is a vessel of information. Not only just that, but even in his youthfulness, I wanted to capture the moment of everything that was happening. The next picture is a photo of these Black men singing. Like, they were beautiful. I wish if anybody was there on there that day to hear the performances, this was amazing. And I wanted to capture just this, like, I just wanted to capture what was happening, in the midst of it. Just a moment of joy, and like a moment of joy and singing. Like, one thing I've learned throughout, like what I've learned in history is, as a people, we always are always expressing through music and song. Like, we are very big on this. And I wanted to capture this moment of just like a moment in time, just of what's happening, you know.
Yeah,
So,
I love, oh, I'm sorry. I just going to say, I love how expressive they are.
Yeah, thank you. And I wanted to, with the coloring, I kind of felt like there wasn't a lot of color in the original images. I wanted to show like just the moment of what's happening, you know. And for the first one, I kind of wanted to make it a little blue because I definitely believe like blue has an interesting color. It's an interesting color of not only just of, it's not for sadness, but a lot of it is just like the coldness of things, you know. So I wanted to put these pictures in the perspective where you're more focused on what's happening, you know.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to give us a chance to go back to Rashaad. Sorry for the bit of the technical challenges, but that's the world that we live in these days. So Maya and Rashaad, I'll let you continue the conversation, and I'll bring back the.
If I can just say, Annette, that's the Wamba African drumming troupe there. And they, you know, was instrumental in being very visible and encouraging the morale of people throughout the pandemic and the protests. I saw them performing just about all of 2020, whether it be at, you know, the public market, Park Avenue, downtown at MLK Park, such as the picture that we just saw. They really were out there encouraging us. So back to these pictures, a sanctuary for Daniel Cruz. So we know that Daniel Cruz really was killed by Rochester Police Department. There's really no other way to say that. That's what happened. And so these two pictures are first a picture of his memorial on Jefferson and McCree Way in the city of Rochester. And, you know, for me, this picture, it says so much about my childhood, about the neighborhood, about the city of Rochester, about the residents, about Daniel Cruz as a black man. I mean, there's just so much happening in that particular picture as we see this memorial, these makeshift memorials that happen around town when yet another life is taken. We see this, these candles, these memorials, these flowers, and all of these things. And although I never met Daniel Cruz, I am Daniel Cruz as a black man, you see. And so it hits home very, very deeply for myself. And as far as my childhood is concerned, you know, I used to live on McCree Way. Back then it was called Bronson Avenue. I lived the block up from where this happened, okay? My mom and I first came here, our first apartment was on Bronson Avenue. The church that I went to was on the other end of Bronson Avenue towards Tennessee Street. My aunt owned a convenience store a block away from here, you see. Back in the day, there used to be something called the Swan Festival, and that all of Jefferson Avenue used to be one big block party, okay? And so it was just very, very heart-wrenching to see this happen, to see that video, to see that Daniel Cruz was killed in front of a church. There's a church right there on that block. And so it would be fitting to then think about how I could honor the life of Daniel Cruz in this photographic and video exhibition this weekend by appropriately, I feel like, naming it a sanctuary for Daniel Cruz. In the black and white picture, which was taken by Sean Booth, by the way, is a celebration, Black joy, that even though the pandemic of racism is very much a part of our livelihood as Black people, we still have Black joy. We still have an opportunity to celebrate the life of Daniel Cruz. And this particular day, his family had come in from Chicago and other family members and relatives, and we had a party on Jefferson Avenue, and this was an opportunity of capturing that moment. That's Daniel Cruz's father right here in your immediate right corner. Those are his aunties, his cousins and friends, his brother, Joe Cruz, are all right here. And what you see is a celebration of Black life and Black joy.
Thanks, Rashaad. I think what you said is crucial. I think in particular with the Black community, we tend to celebrate even in the middle of pain, right? So if this was just a regular funeral, we would continue to celebrate. And I think that's part of our culture and what makes us be able to continue to press on in the middle of everything. So I appreciate you showing the both sides of it, that in the middle of everything, we do find joy. We're going to move to the second page, and if you can talk a little bit about these pictures and what were some of your thoughts about this. I know this is when you went down to the inauguration, so if you can explain a little bit about that, what you saw, and the feelings and emotions that also came about being down there.
Sure. So Bert and I, my right-hand man here, we tripped down to Washington, D.C. for the inauguration. You know, we braved COVID and we did it. You know, and we were in D.C. here, right downtown near the Capitol, and what we're seeing is a military force, really, to protect our democracy. We see the Capitol behind a barbed wire fence, a makeshift barbed wire fence, if you will. And these pictures, to me, are symbolic of the systems of racism that perpetuate violence against Black bodies in the first place. And so for me, it is somewhat of a meta critique of the pictures and the subject matter in and of itself of our democracy then really turning in on itself by the very systems that perpetuated its downfall or its, you know, effect on Black bodies.
I also want to touch on something that you had mentioned to us once, that first I want you to talk about the rest of the team members that were part of the work. Also, you mentioned once that your team, when you went to these protests and rallies locally, people referred to you as their media, the people's media. You could talk about that and you know, how all this has impacted you emotionally and personally.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and you know, press for the people is a slogan that I coined because, you know, I feel like it's up to us to tell our own stories. It's up to us to be our own representatives. It's up to us to essentially be our own media at this time, because we know that the major channels of media, you know, don't always tell the right story, or don't always tell the story in ways that really highlight exactly what happened, how it happened, and who it ultimately affects. And so it's an opportunity for us to really tell our own stories through our own lenses, and to also have that connection with the people. Because you see, when I'm on the street and I'm video recording folks, they know who I am because I've made the conscious effort to make those connections with these folks. I'm not just in their face with a camera. I'm actually talking to them, having conversations, appreciating the work that they're doing, appreciating the sacrifice that they're making. And so it is truly press for the people.
And then if you just want to talk a little bit about your own journey doing this work.
Yes. I always hesitate talking about so much about myself because I really just want to, you know, make sure that other people's stories are told and that, you know, I'm doing it justice. But in my own experience with this work, it has been very laborious. It has been very trying on the spirit. It has, you know, left me feeling at times alone and isolated. Because, you know, after the media is shot, after the videos are recorded or whatever, somebody has to spend a whole lot of time reliving that trauma, okay? And so as I watch these hours and hours of video and I'm seeing the different perspectives that different videographers have taken on, then I'm kind of reliving maybe what their emotional state was as they took those images. And so I'm not only taking on my own trauma, but I'm also taking on the trauma of the artist that shot the work. And so it was, you know, a compounded effect upon me having to really relive a lot of these moments. but also encouraging and hopeful, right? Because it's our responsibility, again, to tell our own story. It's our, the onus is on us, really. And so emotions aside, it still had to get done. And I was committed to the work, and so that's what I was doing. But those things definitely did happen. And there were times when, you want to reach out to folk and you want them to, maybe be more responsive. And a lot of it is, waiting for people to be ready to have a conversation, waiting for people to feel emotionally able to be able to talk or to deal or whatever. And so my time doesn't always line up with someone else's time. And so having these exercises in patience, having this, opportunity to say, okay, Rashaad, you have to know that all of us are experiencing this simultaneously. We're all going through something. And so really realizing that and understanding that was something that I grew even in this process of documenting this work and working on this project.
I think that's important what you said, and as we're transitioning over to Bert, I think trauma is real, and I remember having conversations with Bert about the hours that he had to go through looking through the film, looking through the photographs and what that is, and I think in particular, I think it's important too, as we're talking about this, one of the things that came up after the George Floyd conviction is that, particularly for Black folks, to be able to take time off, right, and really understand that the trauma is real and that trauma, we're dealing with the trauma of today, but we're also dealing with the trauma of potentially 7 generations, because we know that trauma can be passed on 7 generations. So as you're talking about, time, Rashaad, and working on other people's time, I'm encouraged that you all are also finding time for you all to deal and process with your trauma, whether that is talking to each other, and it sounds like you all have really created infrastructure in a community where you can trust and be able to converse in a way that is intentional, but very much in a way that it's confidential. And I think that's important to this process, and as artists, and again, like you all being on the front line and seeing things that we may not see. So Bert, as we transition over to you, would love for you to talk about a little bit of your pictures, how you got part of this, and again, too, if you have any of those the things that what Rashaad talked about when it comes to the trauma part of it and what you saw and how that relates to the work that you do now and as you continue to do. So we're going to go back to that first picture so you can talk to that one first. Absolutely. And a little bit about yourself as well.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate, thinking of me to come here today and speak and kind of, narrate some of these photos for you guys and talk to you about my experiences. So I've been shooting for a long time, and kind of growing up in the inner city, being like the artsy kid doesn't really, go well, especially being a smaller stature anyway. So I was always into like the playing sports and all the popular things, right? But I always, harnessed my arts, whether it be drawing, painting, photography, video. So I've been documenting, events probably since about 2004 or so. So I really consider myself like a student of light. See, because I don't have any real technical training as far as any degrees on being a photographer or videographer, but I think that my experience across all the genres is kind of what gave me, I think, a different perspective of shooting in these environments. So shooting everything from real estate to, athletics, portraits, you name it. I felt that if this was happening in my city, in my community, whether it was for, someone from our community or someone outside of the community, I still feel like it's part of our community because we're all the same people, right? We're people. So what you're seeing here is a shot from specifically the Brianna Taylor demonstration that happened for her birthday celebration, where they actually, and you mentioned something about the trauma. This one was actually really hard for me. Prior to this, it didn't. I was able to kind of keep myself separate, as an eye, someone with an eye in the sky, just to capture everything, both sides of the, if you want to say conflict, and just remain neutral. And I think this this touched me a little bit more. And this is kind of where my trauma started for me, because they did something where, you know, something I've never seen before at any demonstration. They actually laid down in the middle of the street and they sang happy birthday to Brianna Taylor. Now, it wasn't a happy birthday, if you can imagine, right? So it was such a moment to see all these people together for that reason, and were able to, you know, stay composed, and they all sung it at this very low, somber style of like song. I just wanted to make sure that I can grab every possible angle of what was happening on that day to bring all these type of people together. So when you look at this shot, you see all the different colors, you see all the different walks of people from different walks of life. And then something that stands out the most is the fact that someone is fully suited up to prepare for conflict. And that in a demonstration where people are sitting down, singing with signs, to see someone like that tells you there's a possibility of violence, obviously, where you have to protect yourself. And that kind of gave me, you know, started to let me know, hey, you know, this might start to go down the path where some of the stuff I've seen online, Hong Kong, you know, all the type of big protests and stuff like that. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure I'm capturing, you know, as much a big wide angle shot to capture a bunch of things that's happening all at once. And that's kind of what you got here.
Yeah, it's amazing hearing the stories behind the photos and like you said, how much you're capturing and what you're trying to say. Like they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I think you really showed a lot of that emotion in this picture. The next one to me is one of the most beautiful. I would love to hear the story behind this one. So
this is where one of the demonstrations on Jefferson, and I think at this one I was doing both filming and taking some stills. And so I was in the middle of filming. I saw the young man, and it just something told me, you know what, this is for a child at this age to be experiencing this type of event or demonstration. I'm sure he's not really even sure what's going on, you know, but I know that this is something that's going to stay with him all his life. He's going to remember being on Jefferson for Daniel Prude and bending down and lighting his own candle for him. You know, he saw everyone else lighting candles. He's like, I think that I need to do this too. Without any direction, I saw this little young man do that. And at the same time, I was kind of watching him to make sure, you know, he didn't burn himself, that type of stuff, you know, but I just felt that it was something that this moment in time will last forever right here. And I had to grab it. And so I'm glad that you guys, you know, see it the way I see it, you know, and appreciate the shot.
And can I just say that that's one of the pictures that's featured in the show at the Black House Saturday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
So now this one, what you see here, we on the left, we have a celebration that was happening at Jefferson again. And I believe this is a resident who lived nearby. So I'm sure has received tons of trauma from this incident based on the fact that her close proximity to the area. Now, these balloons, I believe she was going to release. Now, there was no prior, notification of anything like that. And once again, just kind of with my wide eye, I just so happened to notice her. I look over and there we go. And so it felt like a moment, once again, that needed to be captured for everyone for the future. So I gave it a click, and there you go. Also, now to the right, we have a demonstration that was happening at the beginning of each march from Manhattan Square Park. Now, what was going on was, you know, when you have when something's bothering you, right? You can't just go and say, "Hey, look, this is bothering me." You would have a list of what is bothering you and maybe solutions, right? So I think that's what they were doing here with the list. It has the people's demands, and they were saying, hey, look, we will continue to gather as a community, bringing all the people together from the community, young and old, right here to this place until we check every box on this list. And they worked really hard to get as much as they can done. And if I'm not mistaken, they're still working on it now. But I kind of wanted to make sure that we get that too, because it wasn't just a group of people gathering just to, have complaints. It was a group of people that were coming together that had complaints and had solutions and say, hey, look, we can change it by doing this. And, we can reimagine that. And it's just helping move forward, bring the community to a level where we are thinking outside of the traditional box, in which, may or may not be, offending to some, right? And that we're in a time frame where now we want to try to be more humane, right? And let's be more humane, but let's be humane to everyone equally, So I think that was brilliant. They had this humongous thing. You couldn't miss it. And if I'm not mistaken, I took that shot for a few hundred feet away. So yeah, that thing was huge. It might've been 10 feet by something or other. Yeah, that was awesome.
Bert, you were at one of the first protests and then continued on throughout. So can you talk about what you saw from the beginning to what you saw when you were in DC and what that looked like, and other artists that you may have run into, and all of the things that you were able to see from the beginning? Because if I remember calling you early on and saying, can you make it? And from there, just being able to be there. And to your point, you started off with stills and you did some video and all of these things. So if you can just talk about a little bit of what you saw throughout the protests, from moving from George Floyd to Daniel Cruz to Breonna Taylor to, all of these things that came out. And then if you could just talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So initially I was just coming back from Houston and when the incident occurred, and I actually caught wind of it from an activist, just a community member, and said, hey, look, this is what's going on. So I caught wind of the very first demonstration just as an activist, a community member, just to come out and join forces with everyone else and march for a cause. So, just the natural, ability, I guess, it just tells me, make sure I have my cameras always anywhere I go to something, where it's going to be some type of situation where people are coming together. And it's kind of something that comes from my dad. He always had the camera with him, every family event, everything we did. So it's just human nature. We carry the camera like a wallet, right? So we get down there and I thought to myself, wow, this seems to be like maybe historical type of situation. And I probably should start capturing stuff, especially because the actual, the organizers of the events invited me and say, hey, yeah, absolutely, sure. If you'd like to shoot photos, go for it. And I let them know, hey, look, I'm from the community. I was pretty much raised here, and I'm going to be shooting from a neutral point of view. So I'm not mainstream media. I don't work for anyone. I'm here literally just to capture, what I see. Right. So yes, from the very first one, it was, you can tell that the community was going to grow. The community of people who were unhappy and wanted some change was going to grow. Maybe not everyone knew exactly, especially on the first day. It drizzled a little bit, right? I think it rained on and off the whole day, but it didn't deter anyone. People came, they had ponchos, they had their, their water. Like, everyone was kind of ready. And some people maybe did research on what you do for demonstrations. I didn't, but everyone there was sharing information with each other, telling everyone what to do. And obviously we're adhering to all COVID restrictions. Everyone's wearing masks. We're trying to stay 6 feet apart. I even have like some video footage, I believe, that I submitted from like the very first kind of talk, where they were telling each other to make sure that you exchange information with someone, write the phone number down on your arm, just in case something happens. And throughout the demonstrations, as they began to escalate, because it happened very fast. The escalation happened within maybe the third, and that was, I think that was before, right after we spoke, Maya, on the phone, and kind of asked if I was, interested in going down there and continuing what I was already doing, and I obviously was fully into it. Because I felt that it was important, because mainstream media, as we know now in digital age of sharing information instantly, mainstream media can go out there, shoot something, have a narrative, put it out online, and in seconds, you got stuff going on that may not necessarily be the real story. So I think that it's very important to have community members that have the, maybe any type of artistic visual capacity to be out there as someone from, the community that is capturing the media and for what it it not being one-sided, you know, to kind of push a narrative or the other. Now what you're seeing now is a photo down from the inauguration, I believe. This is from the inauguration. Now, after what happened on January 6th, I believe, they took a different measure on the whole city, which was something that now I saw from the beginning, it escalate, you know, in small increments locally. I had no idea what was going to happen on January 6th. I don't think anyone did, right? Or if they did, maybe they didn't make the best preparations. But what you see here is the front line of actual human shields that were in front of them were highway barricades, and in front of them were 2 tour buses parked parallel. So in essence, you'd have to drive a tank through 2 tour buses, through concrete barriers, and then through this group of people. And that's just the first wave. And this is in front of the Capitol building in DC on the day of the inauguration.
And I just want to go back to Rashaad to tell us a little bit more about the other team members. Well, this is a Bert photo, but there were a few other team members that took part in the work for the exhibit. You could just mention their names as well.
So additional photographers was Sean Boos, Elijah Santiago Lewis, and Elijah Harris, Karina Chrisman. Additional videographers was Rashaad Scott and Bert Torres, of course, because Bert shot both video and photos. So yes, and all of them, you know, contributed to this archive, to documenting this, you know, historic moment in our history, not only in the history of Rochester, but in the history of the world, really. And so we all had a part in making this happen, and I'm appreciative of them all.
And then we have a question actually from Simeon. I don't know if he's still with us, but any of you can answer this one. But oh, there he is. You can ask the question yourself.
Sure. So one of the things that was really interesting about the medium of photography is that there's a fascinating dimension where the picture that you take, the photo that you take, and the interpretation that you layer into that photo really has in some sense a timeless quality, right? That we look back at photos from certainly yesteryear, and in fact, you know, kind of even portraits and other medium for kind of expressing what was going on at the time. And in some sense, there's a parallel with some of what we do at the Community Foundation, which is an effort to kind of transcend time and allow folks to express their philanthropic legacy, but for that legacy to endure. So I'm just curious about your perspective on time and how photography transcends time, and just any sense that that any of you have on that front.
Yeah, I guess I can start if that's okay. So I mean, you mentioned time, and it's kind of funny because you say that word, and that's something that kind of inspired me, you know. And let's just say, for instance, in high school, I remember going into, you know, certain rooms, or let's say the library, and you'll see the Time magazine, right? So it was always these outstanding cover photos, and they were always mind-blowing, and always made me want to think more and say, well, what's going on here? You know, let me go in here, let me see what's going on. So I think that maybe the angle of me embracing those types of shots kind of gave me, you know, a perspective of saying, you know what, this photo right here could actually be, you know, tell a lot, and going to be able to tell it years from now. And so that's kind of how I interpret that.
I agree with Bert. For me, it was National Geographic. I was really big into portraits. For me, a lot of portraits tell a lot about the times, and I feel like with images, that's specific, especially images and what I've studied throughout art, like just in history, like the way pictures are taken tell what's happening at that moment, you know. And when people look back on those images, they want to be able to see, like, okay, what's happening in this picture, and what does it say about what was happening at that time? And for me to for me to be a co-curator for this, one of the things I loved was Bert's images. Bert really took every conceivable image you could think of to tell a story of different types of like what was happening in the protests and the rallies. Bert really captured it.
Thank you. Wow.
Seriously, I was blown away. Like really, it was really blown away. And I think that's the one thing I liked about like the whole entire about this whole entire show is that every photographer and every videographer had a different perspective of what was happening. You had people take pictures of, like me, I took portraits of people and what was our groups of people. Bert took like shots of what was happening from like, especially from like the demonstration of everybody laying on the ground. Like I didn't know they were singing happy birthday, but that image itself said a lot of being like about a lot of what it's like to be a community and like what happens when your own, even if you aren't in the same community, like when your own is taken away because of carelessness and neglect and just evil, you know? So it's just like, just capturing all of those different things happening for me it felt like for me, I was doing something, like I said before, you know? So as an artist, you know, capturing all these things happening, and even back when I was in Charleston, like I was taking portraits of people there because I feel like portraits add more to the sense of the individual, like a person, you know, getting to know them, getting to ask their stories and what's happening. So when you take a picture of a person, their portrait states their existence in that time. So for me, that's what I wanted to do with each portrait, each interaction I had with everyone, whether they were holding a sign that said something that was so profound or just them engaging with other people, you know, and just to, and I feel like for this, it made people be able to feel seen, like seen as a human, seen as an individual, seen as a member of the community. It makes people's voices more amplified, even if they don't have the words to say anything.
Just to kind of add a quick follow-up, and Rashaad, I definitely want to hear your voice on this as well. I'm curious if you guys see yourself as kind of purely documenting the moment or even expressing your voice kind of in this enduring way. Is an either or choice there, or is it both? I'm just curious, kind of documenting the moment or expressing your voice, kind of what you see happening in the photos.
For me, it's... Oh, go ahead, Rashaad. You can go. Go. You're good.
I was just going to say really quick that for me it is both, right? Because I have a responsibility to document the moment for what it is. But more than that, I am expressing myself as I see it in a way that I can tell a story only told by me because I was there documenting that moment. And so there is some intersectionality with that, with both expressing myself as, you know, maybe even the producer of the image, as well as documenting that moment in time for what it is.
Thank you, guys.
And what was Coco?
I was going to say both as well. When being in those moments, especially when I've learned when it came to photojournalism, it's like you can't put so much of yourself in. You can't have so much bias. And I think that's what Bert was talking about, that you have to be neutral and taking pictures of like everything because you're there documenting what's happening. But for me, that's also the other part of seeing myself, is because I see myself in these people who are here. They're here to like vocalize what's happening and their pain, their sorrows, their frustrations, you know, their fears. Like that's what you want to document too. You want to show what's happening. And for me, incorporating both are both just as important. And I don't think either one is more important than the other, because I feel like they're both just as important in telling the story and the narrative of what's happening.
Yeah, and speaking of being part of history, you were doing all of this in the middle of a pandemic. So can you talk about what that was like, Bert? You touched on it at the beginning, the 6 feet apart and everything. But as you kept going, like...
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, initially just getting invited to the very first one, you know, COVID was super high, you know, everything was like, hey, look, you know, hand sanitizers, mask, gloves, all of that stuff. So everyone who wanted to voice their opinion, they still understood what was going on. And although some people may not felt comfortable being outside, they said, you know what, this cause is important enough to say, you know what, someone lost their lives. People are losing their lives. And if I have to just wear a mask and some gloves and have some hand sanitizer to come out and still voice my opinion for people losing their lives, then they were okay with that. And I was okay with it. I mean, I've been traveled a lot, so I've been seeing people for the past few years that are international travelers wear masks, right, and stuff. So it was always kind of, a known thing that there may be stuff going on that, we are not really sure of what exactly is out there, right? So we should want to be mindful anyways. But moving forward, just experiencing everything in the pandemic, seeing, you saw some real radical people that didn't believe in any of it, right? So they didn't wear any masks. So you really want to make sure you're protecting yourself in a situation like that. And that's kind of something what you saw more in DC. Once we got to the inauguration, it was like any radical group that had any type of side of their story that they wanted to push across, right, or get their message about, they were there. There was even like, one guy's, a group of people had their sign and they had their cause. Another group of people across the street had their sign and their cause. There was a guy up the street with a sign that was like, hey, just because we disagree, we don't have to argue. So when he saw that, he actually brought his display and he sat in the middle of them. So it was so many things going on, and especially in the middle of the pandemic, you had to absolutely keep that mindful. Say, hey, look, make sure you're washing your stuff, making sure you're trying to keep your space. Although people were getting very emotionally charged with what they were trying to put across to each other. But as kind of touch on the question before about Simeon's question about being, neutral and or like putting some of your emotion into it. I want to say personally, I still, because I'm a student of light and I just like to make sure I'm capturing everything, I do the best I can to stay neutral up until the point where I was shot in the throat with a pepper ball. Luckily for me, I had my goggles down around my neck, so there's some divine intervention there. And at that point, I felt, wow, they don't even see me as, mainstream media or freelance media for any good doing at all. Obviously, I'm targeted as if I was a protester and with the group, although I'm standing with them. I have shots where I was standing with police officers before it got too crazy. But once it got too crazy, they were like, nope, everyone's an enemy to us. But that's what I felt like, So I even after getting shot with a pepper ball, I still did the best I could. That night, I kind of went maybe a little emotional with my shots after that. But, I centered myself and was able to kind of get back to being neutral. And that's kind of what you got. So when you see my shots, that's really not emotionally charged. Really is just showing what was happening. And if you decide to feel emotionally charged for what you see, then maybe I did my job.
We have about 7 minutes left, and I want to answer a question that was asked. For those who are visually impaired and things of that sort, who have challenges when coming to see some of the artwork and such, how can they still see the artwork? What are you all looking to do to be able to make that available for them? I think that's important to, as we're capturing this, we want to make sure, as we're providing caption right now, we want to make sure that those who are visually impaired or have other impairments are able to see some of this work. So how would they go about seeing that? Is there an email address or a way that they can reach out to you all to see some of the work that you all have done?
I'm going to let Rashaad take that one if he knows.
Hey guys, sorry about that. I had to plug up the power source. So our intent and purpose for this work is to obviously exhibit to the public in a public exhibition, but to also have it be available in an archive, right? And so that is something that we're working on as well, that this work will be available to folks after the fact in an archive. Lord?
So will the, okay. So I'm assuming that the archive will be available in a way that maybe the pictures are larger. I think that's what we're trying to get to, not just that, but the pictures can be bigger, that they can be in a way. We want to make sure, again, as we talk about equity, we're not just talking about racial equity, but we're talking about those who have disabilities and such. So again, when we talk about the art, well, there'll be times as we archive this where, again, they're larger, they have larger print to be able to talk about some of the things that happen. Will that be part of it as well?
Yes, realizing that is, a part of what should happen. that is something that we will work to make happen, as a matter of fact. It's something that's very, very important that, all people will be able to, experience the work, whether they have a disability or not, in some form or fashion. And so we will actively work to make sure that that happens.
Right. And so we also want to, full disclosure on Foundation's part, we have supported this project, and we'll be looking to work together on making sure those archives are realized, so that this history that you all have wonderfully captured is preserved for generations to come, so that everyone knows this story. And touching on that, how do you think Rochester has changed in the past year after all that you've experienced? Do you think there are lessons learned to try and move this community forward in a positive way?
Wow, that's a loaded question to answer, because honestly, being out there on the front lines, we've seen a lot happen with organizers, with protesters, with politicians, with, leftist groups, rightist groups. So we've seen a lot happen. I think that overall, we're all made much more aware of what side we're on. That's one of the chants. Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? And that's one of the things that we're learning more and more about, truly, which side folk are on. And so change, I think that change is imminent. I think that change is, we're on the precipice of change, in how we're seeing so many young people become involved in the movement and, take ownership of, what their voice really, the power that their voice really does have. And so I think that we are getting there. Are we there yet? No, I don't think so. But I think that, we are moving hopefully in the right direction of true change in the city of Rochester, especially by the work that we're doing, making folk aware, putting it out there, braving, the coronavirus to, be on the front line and to tell the stories in our own voices. I think that all these things are leading in that direction.
All right, we just have a couple of minutes. I want to thank everyone for attending today. This was wonderful. Thank you for all the work all of you have contributed to capturing all this living history, as we talked about. And I'm going to let Maya close it out with what's next for the intersection.
Yeah, thank you all for attending, and we will have another part of the webinar, the intersection, and we will be transitioning a little bit from the art part of it. We will be talking to Candace Jones, as well as Malenka Jones and Candace Parker, who will be talking to us regarding what does it look like to have a community where we are healthy when it comes in terms of our safety. And we really want to be able to understand, how do we galvanize our community and those in it to be able to talk about safety in terms of policing and what that looks like, and begin to really understand that we need a table that's specific to being able to understand how do we talk about safety in a way that is going to be inclusive to all. So I have put that in the chat, that our next one that we'll talk about centering racial equity to sustain justice. And that will be May 19th at noon. So we hope that you will join us on that one as well. And we look forward to hearing from you all. And again, we thank you again for being here.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me.
Have a wonderful afternoon.
You
Thank
too.
you. Have a wonderful afternoon.